Hello and welcome to the channel. When I started preparing for this video, my original plan was for it to be a long overdue review of the fabled SEGASONIC the Hedgehog arcade game. After many years of searching for this in Japanese arcades, I finally conceded recently that if I were to ever review it on this channel, I'd need to resort to emulation. And in case you're not familiar with it, SEGASONIC is controlled using a trackball. And I've just wasted no end of time trying different pads, mice, keyboards, trackballs, fucking footballs, anything I can think of to make an emulated version play somewhat faithfully to the arcade original. But to no avail. So screw it, that can wait for now. Today we'll look at SEGASONIC Bros, a cancelled 1992 arcade puzzle game from Sega. The TLDR of the story is that it never got released due to some poor location testing in Japan, and was pretty much forgotten about until 2016 when it re-emerged and eventually got dumped online. Anyway, it may be unreleased, but having just spent a few hours playing it, it feels like a surprisingly complete and stable product to me. So why did Japanese test audiences dislike it so much that it got shelved? Let's find out. Real quick, if you enjoyed this video, give that like button a little tap as it helps me out a lot. And if you're new here, consider subscribing for more high quality evergreen Sonic and Sega videos. Now let's get into my review of SEGASONIC Bros, the cancelled arcade game. I have no idea what the story is here. I'm going to assume there was going to be some sort of intro sequence in the end product, but as the game never saw the light of day, I guess we're never going to get to see that. But based on the visual information we have here, I'm going to make an educated guess that this red Sonic and yellow Sonic are Sonic's brothers. And going left to right, I'm going to assume based on his pose and expression that the red Sonic is the happy, fun one of the group, the middle yellow one is maybe the shy, grumpy one, and then we have the cool blue Sonic we know and love. When you reach level 30 while playing the game, a white Sonic shows up too. I don't know what his deal is though. Eggman is the antagonist as usual, as we see him during gameplay dicking around with some tech in the middle of the stages and presumably generally making a nuisance of himself. Also discovered within the game's files are unused sprites of Sonic's band, a cut concept from Sonic 1 due to memory limitations. We see Vector the Crocodile and the rest of the band in a cage, and eventually breaking free from said cage, so I'm guessing freeing Sonic's band stroke friends was a core part of the story, as usual. Moving on. At its core, SEGASONIC Bros is another in a long line of descending block puzzle type games such as Puyo Puyo, or Mean Bean Machine, Columns, Tetris, and so on. Squares of 4 Sonic Bros drop down at a time containing a random combination of red, blue, and yellow Sonics, which can be rotated as required to create loops or fences around the other Sonics in the grid. Creating these, I'll call them loops, of one color of Sonics around the others will remove all the other Sonics within that area, scoring you points and progressing you through the levels. The edge of the stage also counts towards the wall of the loop you're creating, which means, for example, if you get a line of one color of Sonics more or less in a horizontal row, you'll wipe out all the Sonics below it. These loops can be chained together, and if done successfully, massive amounts of Sonics can be taken out in one move, zapping the fuck out of Eggman in the process for some reason. And you'll get a lot of points if you're able to completely clear the screen. As time goes on, the rate in which your Sonic blocks fall increases, and from level 30 a 4th white Sonic is added to the mix to ramp up the difficulty. Also, once in a while you'll get a Chaos Emerald drop down, which will take out an entire single row of Sonics in one go, which is somewhat helpful, or if you have an empty space on the bottom row, it will clear the whole screen, which is very helpful, so basically a blast upwards. If your Sonic blocks reach the ceiling of the stage, it's game over as you might expect. Gameplay starts out slowly, but as you progress you'll reach points where the speed really ramps up significantly, creating a mega stressful gaming experience. But in a really good way, as you scramble to find a link anywhere you can to wipe out these Sonics. The music tempo increases too, adding to that feeling of pressure. If you can survive, you'll come out the other side into a well-deserved slower section, letting you breathe a temporary sigh of relief. This up and down intensity reminded me of interval training on a running machine at the gym. So, is it fun? Well, yes, it really is. I found this gameplay to be a little hard to wrap my head around at first as I tried to work out what counted as a fence of Sonics. I'd say it has a steeper initial learning curve than something like Puyo Puyo or Tetris, which perhaps makes it a little less accessible at first. But I got a lot better at it as time went on, and before I knew it, I was having a blast. There were certainly times though when the music was racing at high speed and the blocks were piling up, when my brain just couldn't process it anymore and I found myself relying on 90% luck to get through the section. I really appreciate that SEGASONIC Bros is trying to do something different to set it apart from other games in the genre. At least it's something different as far as I'm aware. I'm not a huge puzzle gamer outside of Puyo. But in an effort to stand apart and do something somewhat unique, it's perhaps a bit overly complicated to pick up and play at first. But stick with it and you'll get into it pretty quickly. There are some two-player modes too. A head-to-head mode, a mode where you both essentially play the single-player game side by side. Maybe I'll look at these more in future, but as I'm really no mates today at the time of making this video, we'll move on. On a quick side note, I know it's not a final product, but the scoring doesn't make much sense in this game. Simply selecting the medium or high difficulties starts you with massive amounts of points right out of the gate compared to the easy setting. Yet I felt the difficulty levels were only slightly higher. It's weird. I guess it would have been reworked for a final release though. Anyway, great fun, but with a bit of a steeper learning curve than most of these types of puzzle games, I feel. SEGASONIC Bros is a bright and colourful game, and even in this incomplete state with presumably some placeholder graphics, it still looks great. I like the additional shading they've gone with on the sprites here, which sets Sonic and Eggman's looks apart from their console appearances. There's some really nice chunky sprites, and some nice animations too, such as when Robotnik gets zapped when clearing a large amount of Sonic Bros in a single move. And I also like that the Sonics go into their spin attack when you rotate the blocks, and into their falling or hit animations when holding down to speed up the block's descent. Some nice little visual touches here. The stages are all based on zones from Sonic 1, but to keep things visually uncluttered, the back of the play area is always kept to solid grey squares. This makes it easy to keep track of what's going on without the game becoming a cluttered mess. No complaints here graphically whatsoever, and I'm sure it would have had more visual flourishes in the final release too. Still looks great here though. The soundtrack here is comprised of upbeat little background ditties that keep the gameplay feeling light and fun, even when in reality it is often stressful as fuck while trying to work out the best plan of attack with mere seconds to make a decision. During the high intensity peaks, the tempo of the soundtrack picks up accordingly, adding a sense of pressure, then slows back down as you break through to a more chilled out section. For whatever reason, when you use a Chaos Emerald, the sound cocks up and you lose the background music, at least for a while. This is obviously down to it being an unfinished game though. I won't hold it against it. The music was solid. I was tapping my foot and nodding along while playing. Always a good sign. What I didn't care for so much though was the loud alarm that rings out when you get near to the ceiling of the stage. I'd say it was more annoying than tension building, but I'm just going to say this was probably a placeholder that would have been amended for the final release. Finally on the audio, curiously, the Blue Spears music from Sonic 3 appears in this game as part of the soundtrack, so clearly that one was kicking around for a while before finally making an appearance in Sonic 3 in 1994, a full 2 years after this. Even in its current state, this is a really fun little arcade puzzle game. I don't feel it's as accessible as some other similar titles in the genre, but I had a good time with it. I'd have picked this up for the Mega Drive back in the day, no question. Had I known it existed back then as a kid though, as an arcade puzzle game, it would have never had the same allure to me as the isometric action platformer that is SEGASONIC the Hedgehog. It's probably the reason why I'm only just getting around to reviewing this now. I remember when this game leaked some years back, my reaction was, that's a pretty cool piece of lost media, stroke Sonic history, rather than, holy shit, I need to play this. But I gotta admit, I had a lot more fun with it than expected. If you haven't played it, I'd recommend you check it out. I didn't beat it, but looking online, if you hit level 99, you'll get this screen. And that's it. Back to the original question of why the Japanese test audiences rejected it back in the day though. I'm going to assume it's for the reasons I mentioned. The learning curve is perhaps just a little too steep for this type of quick burst of arcade fun. Maybe it would have fared better as a console release. We will never know. And some real quick final thoughts here. Firstly, if this had received a release back in the day, I'm guessing Sonic would canonically have had brothers. It's pretty wild to think about how different the core cast of the franchise could potentially be today if this game dropped and was a big hit. Who knows? Maybe in time some of the story and information on who these other fellas were is going to leak out too. I hope so. Anyway, SEGASONIC Bros, thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching this video. Have you played SEGASONIC Bros? Did you enjoy it? Would you have purchased it back in the day? Would you purchase it now? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you'd like to see me do any more of these obscure arcade reviews of Sega Sonic games, be sure to let me know. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button as it helps me out a lot, and consider subscribing for more high quality evergreen Sonic and Sega videos. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time.